what we want to talk about today is we're going to use the review mirror a little bit first, and then we're going to use the crystal ball a little bit second. So over the last couple of years, since you and I recorded an episode last, obviously there's been a lot of changes in the Amazon ecosystem and in e-commerce in general. But think about the ones that have had the greatest impact on you and your client's business over the last 6, 12, 18 months on Amazon in particular. What are some of those?
Yeah, I mean, the first one that stands out is COVID, and I won't spend a ton of time here because I don't want to repeat stories that people have had, heard now 10 times over. We all know what COVID did in terms of, consumer demand, and everyone was at home and buying things online, and happy to get into detail there if you want. But, I do think probably the most important takeaway of COVID for our industry is that it did genuinely accelerate the adoption of e-commerce across North America. And I would argue globally by, I would say, probably 3 to 5 years. I think largely the changes that you saw in consumer behavior were inevitable, but they were basically sped up. And as we're coming out of COVID, at least in North America, we're seeing a lot of that acceleration in consumer adoption of e-commerce being relatively sticky. There's been obviously some people have gone back to stores, brick and mortar retail by no means is dead, but more and more acceleration and adoption of commerce. I think some of the other big trends over the last couple of years, in particular with Amazon, has been the increasing pay-to-play nature of the platform, the dominance now of paid media in any Amazon strategy. It is just complete table stakes at this point. It is no longer negotiable in terms of whether you do or don't want to play there. And I would say third, more in kind of across, everyone outside of Amazon, is the industry-wide, more or less, adoption of retail media as a revenue channel for both kind of, your established, e-commerce extensions of traditional brick and mortar retailers. So Target.com, Costco.com, Walmart.com, et cetera, all coming out with their own retail media offerings as a way to basically, increase a very high margin revenue stream.
Let me interrupt you there. For the portion of the audience who does not know what the phrase retail media means, let's unpack that.
Yeah, happy to. So basically, retail media is an equivalent of sponsored ads on Amazon, or formerly AMS. So it's basically the idea that an e-commerce retailer or marketplace will monetize their traffic by selling ads on their platform. So they're, of course, making money selling products. That's their core business. But in addition to that, there's a second revenue stream that they can offer or they can capture by basically offering paid placements on their site. Now, historically, a lot of retailers have done this in a way that wasn't, and I'll use another kind of industry buzzword here, but wasn't programmatic, meaning was a human driven, hey, we have some real estate on our site. We'll sell this to you for 50 grand. You can put pictures of your stuff up on banners for a month. Walmart.com has been doing that for 10 years. Now, though, what we're talking about is more of a self-service, marketplace style, a bid-based platform to go in and buy that ad inventory, I would say at scale without having to actually call someone up and say, hey, I want placement. How much are you going to charge me? So Amazon is the case study in this. So everybody is chasing Amazon's success. They now have a $30 billion run rate ad business, which is an entirely incremental revenue stream, and very, very high margin, because you're, unlike their core business where you're selling products, which is a hard way to make money, they're selling bits. They're selling,
air,
digital real estate. Yeah, it has almost zero cost associated with it. So very high margin business, very brilliant thing for them to do. And it's been very effective. And now all of their competitors are looking to go replicate their success. Some are further along than others.
Well, this puts a huge pressure on brick and mortar, as though they didn't have enough pressure already, because brick and mortar doesn't have the ability to do this. Brick and mortar needs to make a profit on every bottle of bleach and every loaf of bread and every can of dog food. From what it sounds to me, Amazon could literally sell all of this stuff at their cost and still make a ton of money every year, because they've got $30 billion and rapidly growing of ad revenue coming in that a Target in a big box store doesn't have.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I do think that, brick and mortar, especially grocery retail, has in some ways been notorious for trying to capture dollars outside of their actual just product margin, and, in terms of slotting fees and marketing allowances and other things. So they've found ways to kind of do this same thing. It's a different approach. It's basically leveraging their scale to just kind of squeeze their vendors and suppliers for more money, which they've been, pretty effective at. But those fees are disconnected from any actual upside for the brand. Safeway charging you a slotting fee does nothing for you besides get your product on the shelf.
Yeah.
I see the big difference with Amazon is and other retail media is, if it's done right, it's self-sustaining, because right now on Amazon, even though it's gotten more competitive, in most cases, for every dollar you spend, you're making $1.30 or $1.50 or $2 in a data-driven, demonstrable way, versus just, the retailer sticking their hand out and you're kind of forced to pay up. So I think that unleashes.
And let me interrupt though. Is that because when someone clicks on an ad, Amazon's making money because they got the click, but also because now the manufacturer's product is getting shown because of the click, and some percentage of the people are going to buy that product. Whereas the shelf space fee, in theory, should do the same thing. The more shelf space you have, the more that you would sell, but it's not as a direct relationship as an ad click.
Yes, I think that's a good way to paraphrase it. And, and I would say even the same goes for quote unquote marketing activities in traditional retail, where, maybe you get a, picture of your product in their newsletter they send out, but everyone throws it away anyway. So it doesn't really do anything besides cost you, $300,000 to pay up so they keep your product in stock. Where with retail media, again, if it's done right, because I've seen some examples of it, maybe not having the best ROI, but if it's done right, it should be a really a genuine kind of win-win for both the retailer and the brand. And that means that when there's a true kind of justifiable monetary incentive behind something, it will grow much, much larger than just kind of a way to, extract more margin. So
on this shift from organic to pay to play on the Amazon platform, what has been the biggest complaint that you hear from your clients?
So, I mean,
or are they not complaining? Maybe they're cheering it.
I think those that our clients, not so much, right? But I think I'll speak to the industry more broadly. I think there's a bias, and I would say any agency is going to have this bias where, if you have the types of brands that hire an agency, you're going to have the types of brands that are generally more bullish on Amazon, right? So like there's a bit of a bias when I look at our clients. When I think about the industry more broadly, there is a level of cynicism around, well, Amazon's just created another way to make us pay, to cough up dollars. And, you could argue that. I think it depends on what view you have. But the biggest downside, probably the biggest complaint, is that it used to be when you were on Amazon, you were, everything was more sort of organic, meaning the success or lack thereof of your product was more based around the sort of natural resonance it had with the customer. Now, there was a lot you could do with content and other things to help improve that. But now you could argue that even if your product is good and it has good content, et cetera, 5 out of 10 of the first placements on a given page are paid. So even if your product is good and you have good content, you have good reviews and all those things, if you're not paying to show up on the paid side of it, you're just going to get your share eaten away over time. So it's a double-edged sword, because there is that downside The upside, however, is if you're a new brand, if you're an upstart, or you're just looking to go out and be more aggressive and capture share, you have a much bigger gas pedal now to slam your foot down on than you used to. So it goes both ways, right? If you're on the more aggressive side, there's a bigger upside. If you're on the more conservative side, there's a bigger downside, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been head deep, or I don't know, neck deep in advertising and studying advertising and figuring out ways to make my campaigns more effective. And I learned some pretty crafty things in the last week in particular. And so if I was a new brand, I would actually very much favor this, because now I have more real estate where I can outsmart, hopefully, through my ad strategy, my competitors. Because in the old days, when ads didn't occupy as much of that real estate, you had to give away a whole bunch of product or do a bunch of coupons or do whatever you could to stimulate, sales velocity so that you could rank organically. Maybe you were doing it with ads, but there was a lot of other gray hat techniques that people were using as well.
Yeah. And again, you can be just as aggressive. It's just the strategies now have changed, and a lot of that action is going to be funneled through paid media, basically. Yeah. So